Okay. Now the first option says it will make US steel exports more price competitive. B says it will lead to productive inefficiency in the US steel mill, right? C says there will be a deterioration in the US terms of trade. And the fourth one says there will be a decrease in producer surplus for US steel producers. What effect do you think tariff will have on the US steel market? Right. Out of all the four options, what do you think? So we'll do the same method. You read the question, I read the question. You think of the answer, I think of the answer. Then we'll look at the marking scheme and then discuss. So think about this. It will make US steel exports more price competitive. No, I mean, if you're putting in, that will make imports less competitive. Yeah, but exports doesn't need to be affected. Above, I don't think so it can be here, right? Because think about this, your export, if US is also exporting steel, I mean, that the price of that is not being affected. So more price competitive exports would mean that the price of your exports is decreasing. If for some reason the price of your exports decrease, then yes, your exports will become more price competitive. But okay, interesting. I think there will be, I think it will be C. Let's check. I think 30 will be C. Well, let's check. And then we can discuss. I think 30 would be, 30 is B. Interesting. It will lead to productive inefficiency in the US steel industry. It will lead to productive inefficiency. Productive inefficiency in the US steel industry because the cost of production is increasing. Oh, right. So why it shouldn't be C? Duration in the US terms of trade. So if there is tariff imposed, your prices of imports is rising. That is what I was thinking about. But B does make sense. Students, did you get it? So what is productive inefficiency? Productive efficiency is when your cost of production rises, right? Average total cost of production. Right. And that is what was happening. Yeah, exactly. Right. So, okay. Let's have a look at this. Let me explain you, right? So terms of trade, you would remember, is index of export prices and divided by index of import prices. So if import prices is rising for any reason, right, like tariff, or let's say generally the demand for imports is high and that's why their prices are increasing, or whatever the reasons might be. So index of export prices divided by index of import prices, that is your terms of trade. So your terms of trade deteriorates because of two reasons. Either the denominator is increasing, which means that import prices is rising in relation to export prices. So either this is increasing, or let's say this is decreasing. So these are the two reasons why your terms of trade deteriorate. So that is my reasoning behind it, that since you are imposing tariff, so imported goods would overall cost you more, and therefore your import prices will be higher, and that is why your terms of trade will deteriorate. But B makes more sense. Why? Because think about this. If you remember, we did talk about productive efficiency. What is productive efficiency? Productive efficiency is when you are producing on the lowest possible ADC curve. So when a firm is producing on the lowest possible ADC curve, that is productively efficient. So let's assume currently US steel industry is operating at ADC 1. It is operating at ADC 1 and this is ADC 2. Now, when the country will impose tariffs, your imports have become more expensive, right? Your imports have become more expensive, and therefore the average cost of production has risen, right? Are you getting what I'm trying to say? So at every level of output, your cost has increased. So that will cause your ADC to shift higher. You can choose any random quantity, right? Since for every quantity, there will be tariff imposed, which is an additional cost, which was not there before. Therefore, your ADC will shift to a higher curve, which means that there will be productive inefficiency in the US steel industry. How many of you got this? Isha, Rabab, does it make sense? Right? Does it make sense? right? Clear? Any confusion so far? Okay, right, perfect. Let's move to the next question. Okay, the US government has been using a policy of quantitative easing. Do remember we talked about this in our class to increase economic growth. What is most likely effect of this policy on the internal and external value of the US dollar? So you were asking me, Isha, what is internal and external value? Now, this is very important. We might not have discussed like this in a class, but it's a very simple and easy concept. So let me explain it to you right now. Internal value of currency. Internal, you already know what internal is, you already know what external is. And what it basically means, internal value means the purchasing power of rupee within Pakistan. I repeat myself. Internal value of rupee, because it's always about the currency, is how much purchasing power, internal value of rupee is how much is rupee's purchasing power in Pakistan. Right? So we are looking at Pakistani perspective. Rupees purchasing power in Pakistan. How much can it afford? And what will affect internal value of currency? What factor or what variable will affect currency's internal value? Who can tell me? Yeah. Any idea? Right. No idea? Okay. Think about this. Inflation. The only thing that will affect Pakistani rupees purchasing power in Pakistan, right? Think about this. If there is higher inflation taking place, this means that the purchasing power of rupee is deteriorating and therefore each rupee will buy less. So internal value is going down. Internal value goes down. Yes or no? Am I making sense to you? What is external value? External value is rupees exchange rate with other currencies. So if Pakistan's exchange rate is improving against other currencies, then this means our currency is becoming stronger. And if it is becoming weaker with other currencies, then it means that our exchange rate is becoming weaker. Is making sense or not? Rupees exchange rate with other currencies, right? So stronger the exchange rate, more the external value, weaker the exchange rate, lower the value. Okay, you did not understand which part, Isha, right? External value you're talking about or internal value? Think about this. External value means how much 1 rupee can buy against other currencies. So think about this. Previously, sometime back, $1 in Pakistan was approximately, not exactly, but let's say it was approximately 110, 115 rupees per dollar. But since then, our exchange rate has depreciated a lot, and now $1 buys approximately, in fact, right now it's 172 rupees. So our currency is buying less units of foreign currency. Our currency is buying less units of foreign currency. This means our external value has decreased. Our currency's external value has decreased. Is it making sense or not? Right? If on the other hand, this would have become from 115 to 50. Now, in this case, it shows Pakistan currency's external value has increased because our currency is becoming stronger against dollars. So that is what external value means. So external value of currency refers to exchange rate, and internal value of currency refers to purchasing power. How much can you buy? Is making sense, right? Okay, very good. Now let's go back to the question above. Is this clear to you? What is most likely? So quantitative, first of all, tell me what was quantitative easing? What was quantitative easing? You remember we talked about this, quantitative easing, right? What is quantitative easing? Okay. Right. But eventually what happens? Government buys government securities, right? Exactly. And what will that do? That's correct. So government is buying back the securities. And what this buying back of securities or bonds do to your exchange rate? Money supply increases, what happens to exchange rate? Absolutely, that's correct. So when money supply increases, what happens to your exchange rate? When, right? What happens? Exchange rate sorry, interest rate. I wanted to call interest rate, right? So when money supply is increasing, sorry, my bad. I wanted to ask that when money supply increases, we know that money supply and interest rate has an inverse relationship. So if money supply will be increasing, your interest rate will be decreasing. So eventually what happens in quantitative easing, that your interest rate decreases, right? So now what you have to think about is that when the country's interest rate is decreasing, what effect will this have on your internal value and external value of currency? What effect will this have on the internal and external value of your currency? Right? Interest rate falls. Absolutely, that's correct. So you're saying exchange rate will fall? Isha, you think exchange rate will fall? Okay, so internal value, external value, you're saying external value will decrease. That's what you're saying. And then what about the internal value? What about the internal value? What effect will it have on the internal value of the currency? So students, the question is simple, right? It says that if there is quantitative easing taking place, and we've already discussed what happens in quantitative easing, your interest rate decreases. So if in your economy, your interest rate is decreasing, what effect will this have on the internal and external value of currency? That's what you need to comment on. Nothing but this. When interest rates are low, tell me what happens to, or first tell me what you think is the answer. We'll go and check with the marking scheme and then explain you the reason for that. Right? So how about we do it? So just quickly tell me what do you think is the correct answer? Isha and Anubhav. Right, sure. Take your time. Take your time. Anubhav, what do you think is the answer? So I'm saying just make a guess if you're not sure. What do you think is the answer? And then we look at the marking scheme and then explain you that. Okay, so you're saying internal value will increase and external value will decrease. Okay. Okay. You're saying A. So decrease. I think it's B. I think it's B. Internal value, because there will be more economic activity, demand pull inflation, lower internal value, and increase, right? So 29, let's see what is 29. So 29 is, where is it? Stop. 29 is A. Okay. Internal value is decreasing, that makes sense. But why would external value decrease? Interest rates are decreasing. So, so what reasoning you, right? What reasoning you had, Isha? So internal value is simple, right? So if interest rates are low, listen to this, students. When interest rates are low, what happens to your economic activity? Exchange rate will fall. How? There is more money supply. You're saying people will be importing more. Okay. 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 Arbab, have a look at this. So students, have a look at this. So the thing is that if first thing, internal value is all about inflation. So you have to link that what effect will this have on the exchange rate? What effect, sorry, for internal value of currency, what you have to think about is what effect will this have on the inflation? When interest rates are low, what happens to aggregate demand? Just answer this. When interest rates are low, we know that consumers borrow more, businesses borrow more, they want to invest more, and overall your aggregate demand increases. When your aggregate demand increases, what happens to demand pull inflation? Demand pull inflation increases. Is it making sense? Demand pull inflation increases. So that means that the purchasing power of the currency will decrease. Is this clear so far? Is this clear so far? Anisha, right? Now, for the external value, since the money supply is increasing, and that is, why the interest rate was decreasing in the first place. So since money supply is increasing, people would be more likely to spend on imports, right? Since money supply is increasing, there's more money available to them, and they would be more likely to spend on imports, right? That's why your exchange rate will also decrease, and therefore overall when interest rates are lower, your internal and external value of currency decreases. Right. Yeah. Always. Yes, Isha. So money supply and interest rates go in opposite direction. Higher the money supply, lower the interest rates. Uh, Lower the money supply, higher the interest rates. Interest rate, exchange rates are also falling. Yeah. Exchange rates are falling. That's why the answer is A. Exchange rates are falling. Exchange rate is falling. What is the reason? That when money supply is higher, above, are you following me? There will be more imports. More imports mean that the supply of currency will increase. So there will be, so we do know that how our exchange rate is determined, demand for currency, supply of currency. So when you import more, supply of currency increases. So now your purchasing power in terms of other currencies less. Right, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's the connection. So higher money supply means higher imports. That's the connection. And imports affect exchange rate then. Are you getting me? So this is the channel that it takes. Yeah. So more money supply, people are more likely to, buy. They have more money supply, more purchasing power, right? So they're more likely to spend their money on imports. When they do that, when the supply of your currency increases, your exchange rate becomes weaker. When there's more demand for currency, exchange rate becomes stronger. When there's more supply of currency, your exchange rate becomes weaker. Is making sense, students? Yes or no? Good. Okay, now moving to the next question. Great. Now moving to the next question, just a second. Okay, now the next question says, here it is. Which statement is most likely to be made by an economist from Keynesian school? I did tell you what Keynesians think about. Any deviation from full employment will only be temporary. Free markets will always lead to an efficient economic outcome. Market imperfections can lead the economy to remain below full capacity for a considerable time. The role of expansionary fiscal policy is likely to be limited. Right. So just to give you a quick recap, I said Keynesian school of economists think that government should play more active role in managing the economy. I repeat, Keynesian school of economics say that government should play more active role in in managing the economy. Right? Are you getting me? Now, which of these statements do you think is supporting the idea that government should take a more active role? Right. Which of these do you think is referring to the fact that the government should take more active role? C, employment, right? Okay, makes sense. Who said C? Arba. C, exactly. And the answer should be C, right? So it is saying that the economy can stay below the full employment and it's C, right? Students, are you getting me? Any deviation from full employment will only be temporary. Let me tell you, classical say that it is A, right? That full employment will always be achieved in the long run. Classical economists say that, not Keynesian economists. Then B says free markets will lead to an efficient economic outcome. Again, classical economists who support free market, classical economists who support free markets, they say that free markets will lead to an efficient outcome. And D is very opposite to what Keynesians believe. D is complete opposite of what Keynesians believe. So D was saying that expansionary role, the role of fiscal policy is limited. Keynesians believe that the role of fiscal policy is a lot. Fiscal policy can do a lot, right? And why is C correct? Because imperfect markets can lead the economy to remain below the full capacity. And in that case, Keynesian economists claim that the government should intervene to correct that situation. So what is the full statement? That imperfect market imperfections can lead the economy to remain below full capacity for a long time, and the government should then intervene to correct that situation. Right? Okay, now let's move to the next question. What belief do Keynesian monetarists share? Expectations rapidly change to changing circumstances. Fiscal policy is most effective economic policy. There is need for individual choice expressed through the market. The velocity of circulation of money is stable. So it says, which beliefs do monetarists and Keynesians? Monetarists are also known as classical. So what I was saying, what beliefs do monetarists and Keynesians share? Expectations rapidly adapt to changing circumstances. Fiscal policy is the most effective economic policy. Expectation rapidly change to changing circumstances. Yeah. What do you think? The velocity of circulation of money is stable. Okay. Right. What about you, Arvab? I would also say it's C. I would say it's C. Let's see. C. Think about this. So, right. Isha, so the velocity of circulation of money. Do you remember we talked about this? We studied this theory. MV is equal to PT. What was M? M was the money supply, V was velocity of circulation, P is the price level, and T is the times of transactions. So for that, I said that V, monetarist economists say that V and T are relatively stable. So V and T are relatively stable, which means that the velocity of circulation and the number of transactions in an economy are relatively stable. So higher the money supply, higher will be the prices. That is what only monetarist economists say. Only monetarist economists say that V and T are relatively stable. Therefore, any increase in money supply will directly result in higher prices for goods, right? But that is not what the Keynesians say, right? But what do they both agree on? That there should be a market available for the individuals to choose. So it should be individual choice. So government should not, just do everything for them. People should have, right? People should have that thing. People should have the choice to choose between the products. Isha, sorry, yeah. Are you getting this? Does it make sense? So only monetarists believe that the velocity of circulation is stable, not Keynesians. They say that velocity of circulation can change. Keynesians say that velocity of circulation can change, right? Okay. Now the next question here says, what is a country's central bank buys government securities from private sector? Central banks buys government securities from private sector. What is most likely effect on long-term interest rates and the money supply? On long-term interest rates. Yeah, so when you're buying back security, what happens? We did talk about this. The money goes back to the private sector. When the money goes back to the private sector, what will that do? The money supply will increase. When the money supply increases, what happens to your interest rates? Right? Yeah, I think it should be B, because when money supply increases, we know money supply and interest rates have inverse relationships, so it should be decreased. Right? 26. Arba, do you think it's the same or do you think it's different? Let's see. 26 is B, right? Arba, is it clear? Right. Okay. Sorry, I did not read it. Perfect. Next question. An individual demand curve for an active money balance will move to the left if there is an increase in. Now, if you remember, we talked about Keynesian, we talked about liquidity preference theory. You remember? We talked about liquidity preference theory and we said that there are three reasons why people want to hold cash or why they want to hold money. So one was transactionally motive. Transactionally motive is basically, the money that you need to buy different goods and services, right? So quantity of money is on the x-axis, interest rates on the y-axis. So one was transactionally motive, that is a straight vertical line, right? Because we said that transactionally motive doesn't depend on interest rates. So if you need a certain amount of money to make your transactions, so no matter what the interest rates are, right, you will always want it to be at that particular level. So that is transactionally motive. Any confusion, right? Then there was a precautionary motive. Again, precautionary motive is, you are demanding, you are holding. What is precautionary motive? A certain amount of money that you have set aside for your unforeseen circumstances. Again, that is fixed regardless of how much is the interest rate. That is fixed, that doesn't change, right? That is precautionary motive, right? No. Are you saying that transactionary motive and precautionary motive, the shape is the same, right? The shape is the same, but the two are different. Graph for both. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, that's correct. And the third and the last type, if you remember, we talked about it, that was speculative motive. So speculative motive is the money that you have after your expenses. So the money that you have after your expenses, I said that you have two options with that. Either you can keep your money in the bank account if the interest rates are high, or you can just keep your cash, right? You can just keep your cash, right? Are you getting me? So the thing is that the thing is that speculative motive curve will be downward sloping because, as I said, if interest rates are high, you would want to keep your money in a bank account, right? And you would want to hold less cash. If interest rates are low, obviously there's no point in putting your money in a bank account, and therefore you would want to hold more cash, right? So that is what speculative motive is. Higher interest rate, people keep money in the bank account. Absolutely, absolutely correct. Okay, now this is the question. It said an individual's demand for active money. Active money is, by the way, what is active money? Active money means transactionary motive and precautionary motive. Active, the word active in itself means that it will be used sometime very soon. So it says that will move to the left. So why will it move to the left? Why would the transactionary motive and precautionary motive move to the left? That's what it says. If there is increase in frequency of income payments, general price level, individual's income, the rate of interest. Yeah. Move to the left if there is increase in income payments, frequency. Interesting. Isha, read it again. Read it again. If prices are increasing, don't you think that you will need to hold more cash? If prices are increasing, general price level is increasing, don't you think? Above individual's income. Read it again. Read it again. Above you too. You guys are making a small mistake. If income is increasing, don't you think that you would want to spend more money? Above, if income is increasing, don't you think that you would want to spend more money, and therefore the demand curve will shift to the right? Right? So that's what I'm trying to say. So if incomes are increasing, you would want to hold more cash because you would want to spend more. You are richer, right? You are richer, right? And similarly, if the general price level is increasing, again, you will want to hold more cash because now things are relatively more expensive. No. Prices, think about this. You are taking it in a different direction. When things are becoming more expensive, think about this. I earn X amount of money, right? So previously, I only used to spend half of that, right? And save half of that. Now, if prices have become higher, I might be spending, right? 70% of this. I might be spending 70% of this. Are you getting me, Isha? So every time, since things are more expensive, I need to hold more money around. Right? It's not that obviously they will have the money, that's why they're holding cash, they have the incomes, but now since things are more expensive, you have to think about it. So let's put it in simple words. I used to buy coffee. I have always bought, let's say, on my daily spending is, let's say, 1 cup of coffee, and one, like, my lunch is, I eat lunch outside, right? So that is the amount that I need for my daily expenses, right? Now, if the coffee prices has increased from, let's say, 100 to 150, and similarly, the food also typically has increased from, let's say, 200 to 400 per meal, then I would now be holding 550 rupees per day rather than 300 rupees before. Are you getting me? Obviously, I can afford it, right? If you can't afford it, then you will not hold cash anyways. Did you get this? Isha? So more the expenses, more the cash you want to hold. And similarly, by the same argument, Albab, think about this. If your parents start giving you twice the pocket money, then you will be holding more cash in your wallet because now you can afford to buy more. So you will want to hold more cash so that you can even spend more. Right. So if you're more frequently getting your incomes, think about it. If you're more frequently getting your incomes, right? So if I get, instead of monthly, if I get weekly, then I don't care if I have enough of, even if I have less of cash in my wallet at the moment. So think about the people who earn on daily wages. That's a perfect example. So people who earn on daily wages, every day they earn income, right? So they get income 30 days a month, whereas salary people only get once a month, right? So since they're getting more frequent income payments, they don't need to have their wallets full of cash all the way. right? Because they know they'll go to work tomorrow and they'll earn something. Am I making sense? So 25 should be A. 25 should be A. Is it making sense? Students, 25 is A. Easy? Did everyone get this? Or there's still any confusion? Right? So the more frequently you get your income, right? So just imagine if your parents give you income every time you ask for it, then you do not have to hold that much cash always, right? You know, you can go and ask them. But if your parents give you just once a month, then you know that you will need to hold, right? Is this clear? Okay, now let's move to the next question then. Okay, what does the accelerator principle explain? Do you remember we talked about this in the class? So what does accelerator principle explain? Right? How changes in consumption lead to changes in income? How changes in income lead to changes in consumption? How changes in income lead to changes in investment? How changes in investment lead to changes in income? You remember, students, we talked about this. Right. It's about investment, and C, it's about how income will lead to change in investment. Now, this is interesting. Think about this. Multiplier, please never get confused with this. Multiplier effect says how investment will result in higher GDP. What did multiplier effect say? Isha, do you remember? Multiplier effect and accelerator effects are basically looking at the same thing but two different perspectives, right? So multiplier effect says how change in injection or change in investment will cause your GDP to rise. How change in investment will cause a rise in your GDP, right? So this is causing this. What is causing what? This is causing this, right? Whereas accelerator effect is looking at the opposite thing. Accelerator effect is looking at the opposite thing, which says that how change in income, which is basically the total income of a country is its GDP, how change in income would result in change in investment, right? So in accelerator effect, you're looking at the opposite, right? So how national income change will result in investment. That is accelerator effect, right? So the answer should be, then the answer should be C. How changes in income lead to changes in investment, right? So 24 should be C. 24 is C. We good? Okay, let's read the next question. During a year, a country's national income in money terms increased by 3%, prices increased by 4%, and total population increased by 1%. What was the appropriate change in real income per head? What was the appropriate change in real income per head? Can you do this calculation? Take a minute, try to do it. If you're not able to, then we will do it together. Yeah. Okay, students, have a look at this. Do you remember we did this formula? You're saying B. Okay. So think about this. I said nominal value minus inflation is equals to real value. You remember I talked about this formula, right? Is equals to your real value, RV meaning real value. So if in monetary terms, your GDP increased by 3%. So this is your nominal value. So 3% was the increase in that. Prices rose by 5%, 4%. So inflation was 4%. So that gives you a real value of -1. And then the population also increased by 1. So to calculate the GDP per capita, population also increased by 1%. So 1% was the decrease in your real GDP, and then there was 1% increase in your real value. So that has to be your real GDP per head has to be decreased by 2%. Your real GDP has to decrease by 2%. Is making sense? Isha, do you remember the formula? Did you get this or not? Because what is GDP per capita? GDP per capita is GDP divided by population. So the simply by looking at the formula, we can tell if your population is increasing, if this thing is increasing, what happens to your GDP per capita? That falls, obviously, simple as that. So we calculated first of all the real change in GDP, that was -1%, which means in real terms your GDP decreased. And then since population is also increasing by 1%, so if population is also increasing by 1%, so there will be an overall 2% decrease in GDP per capita. Did you get this or not? Have a look at this quickly. So think about this. If GDP divided by population is your GDP per capita, which shows basically how much each person is earning, how much on average each person in a country is earning. Now, to calculate real GDP per capita, because not talking about the nominal, it's talking about real, we have to first calculate the real value. Right. If the GDP per capita is high, it's considered to be developed. Exactly. Now, we're not taking the nominal GDP over here. We're taking the real GDP. And what's the formula? Always remember, real GDP or any real variable is equals to nominal minus inflation. Nominal GDP minus inflation. So we are already provided the values in the question. Nominal GDP is your that increased by 3%, inflation was 4%, 3 minus 4 obviously gives you -1. So your real GDP decreased by -1. So your real GDP decreased by -1. And then the population is also increasing by 1%. So your population is also increasing by 1%, which means the GDP per capita will fall even further. So overall, that gives you 2% decrease in your, 2% decrease in your real GDP. 2% decrease in your real GDP. Does it make sense? Isha?